Wow. At the time of recording this, I had been doing this show 10 years. Yep, St. Stephen's was in September of 2013, and I'm recording this in September of 2023. Wow. I've been doing this for over almost 10 years now. That's really hard to believe. And also, at the time of recording this, I had another baby fastly approaching, and my daughter was growing up like a weed, and my two adopted kids, Dylan and Jake, they were both off doing their own thing, and they were both 18, and yeah, it was not a bad time for me. Not to mention, I had just been selected for the Stars in Space program, which basically that means they were about to train me to go into space. And I was making some good money at my job. I was making about $40,000 to $50,000 a year with Stars, and Mia was also making about $40,000 or $50,000, and I was also making some good money from my YouTube channel, and I kept on getting royalties from my books. So I was making about 7 figures. So yeah, I was doing pretty good. But anyway, I came home in about the second or third week of September of 2023, and I got a really unexpected notification on my phone. It was a text from Scott. Me and Scott, we haven't talked in forever, and I mean, the last time we spoke, it was him congratulating me on the new baby that was on the way. So I texted him back and I said, "Hey, how you doing?" And Scott said, "Yes, I'm doing good. I just I got well, there's no easy way to say this, but it's back." And I texted back saying, "What's back?" "What?" "Fredbears," he said. Fredbears is opening up in Texas again. Meaning I'm going to go to Texas again. Alright. Okay. What did they do this time? And he said, "Alright, well, there's this new company opened up in Dallas. It's called Fredbear Frights. And it's a haunted house attraction." "Oh, okay, so not a restaurant?" And he says, No, they serve mushroom pizza and sodas and stuff, but it's mostly a haunted house." Okay, so they're finally embracing all the scary stories surrounding the place. I actually kind of like the idea of a haunted house. And I said, "Oh," and he said, all right. So, well, the thing is, I've been seeing some very concerning pictures from it. And I said, "Okay, like what?" And Scott texted back and said, "Well, I'll just show you the picture." And the picture he texted back was of that same bunny suit that I had punched to death 9 years earlier. But this time, it looked older, grimier, rotted, and it looked like there was some kind of organic tissue coming out of it, and it had just looked withered, and old long bunny fingers were now claws. And it looked like there was a little bit of blood oozing from the mouth. And it just looked like it didn't smell that good either. It just looked haunted and distorted. And I said, "What is that from, like, the new haunted attraction?" And Scott said, yes, it is. And apparently it walks around and scares people. And I said, okay, well, where did the new owner get this? And Scott texted back and said, well, I spoke to the owner and he claims he got it from the old Fredbears. And I said, alright, okay. Well, in that case, I need to meet you down at Dallas Airport in a couple days. And Scott said, alright, see you then. And so I ran to the kitchen to tell Mia what was going on. And I said, Mia, it's okay, I promise. I will be back in a couple days. I'm not going to miss the birth of our son, okay? Okay. And then 2 days later, I was landing at Dallas International Airport. And it's also worth mentioning, I don't really like big airports. And Scott, he picked me up in his normal purple car that he was still driving, even after he earned all that money from the book that he had written about the place. Yeah, the book he had written about Fredbears was called Surviving the Night at Fredbears, and it was a big hit, particularly with teenagers. But I must say, I had written a few good books too. I had written The Massacre at St. Stephen's. I had also helped Scott write his book, and I also wrote the Salaji Survival Guide. And then after that, I helped Scott write the book Sister Location, although I purposefully never took any royalties from the books. I only helped, although my name was hardly ever mentioned in those books. And then me and Mia wrote a book together called The Evil Residence. And then after that, I had written another book called Crazy Cults. And then after that, I wrote another book called My Terror at Sea. And then after that, I had also written another book more recently, and it was called Were Zombies vs. Giant Vampire Bats. As you can imagine, the titles were crazy, and my publisher didn't actually believe me when I told them that they were indeed nonfiction. But they were still published anyway, and they had gotten mostly good reviews and had seen some success. And that was our ploy. We were going to go into Fredbear Frights, and we were going to say, well, we want to give a ghost tour since we're familiar with what happened back at the old Fredbears. And also, we'll do a book signing too. And that's what we did. Although, on the way over to Fredbear Frights, which was, funny enough, near Dealey Plaza, where JFK was shot, on the way over there, we were in a rather serious conversation. Scott said, it's good to see you, Ethan. And I must say, you really are going to love your kids. Well, at least until they become teenagers. But seriously, though, The But seriously though, my kids are in their teenage years. And I don't know, Ethan, it's really rough for me. It's like they become too old for their daddy. You know? They just don't really want much more to do with me, you know? And my wife, she's just becoming more and more cold and distant. You know what I mean? And I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, "It's okay, Scott. You're gonna be okay. I'm sure this is all gonna be okay. All right? Let's focus on the mission." And he said, "Yeah, you're right." Yeah, it sounded like he was about to cry. I could tell some things were just bothering him. Well, we pulled into the parking lot in the late afternoon, and, well, judging by the big sign that was on in the front of Fredbear Frights, I could tell this was going to be an event, because the owner had a big poster announcing that Ethan Upshur and Scott Cawthon were coming. So we met the owner. We found out that his name was Hal, and Hal said, "Hey guys, I can't believe you're here. Oh, I can't believe you're here tonight. Oh, it's gonna be a fun night. I already got so many people coming. Oh, by the way, will you film a TikTok with me real quick, man? Yeah, I gotta announce that you're here." And he quickly pulled out his phone and turned it backwards and said, "Alright guys, so I got with me here Ethan Upshur and Scott Cawthon, the author of Surviving the Night at Fredbear's. And I've got Ethan Upshur here, the author of a whole bunch of scary books that I haven't read. And it's gonna be awesome. They're gonna be here doing book signings and giving ghost tours and telling scary stories all night long." And right after he ended the video, I said, "Wait, all night long?" And he said, "Yeah, man, this place is open all night long, man. From all the way up till 6 a.m., dude. And it opens back up at 5 every day." Huh. Okay, and people come during the night? And he said, "Are you kidding? Yeah, anything to see the spring trap." Spring trap. Okay. Okay, what about... Wait, where did you get the spring trap, I asked. And he said, "Alright, funny you should ask. So, the Springtrap suit was left abandoned in the old pizzeria. And I was down on my luck for years until about 8 years ago, I did a lot, and I mean a lot of research into this place, into the old Fredbears. And I researched everything I could about it, you know? And I became obsessed, so obsessed that one night, even though I wasn't supposed to, I broke in, and sure enough, the suit was still laying there after all these years. And I just picked it up and bought it in my car. And then I opened this place up as a haunted house attraction, and Springtrap was my all-star attraction. And the best part is, every night he comes to life and scares the kids and makes me a bunch of money. Oh man, I'm making some good money here. Oh, and by the way, next month, a documentary me and Scott have been working on is coming out. And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad that you were able to turn child murder into a rather profitable business. And Scott looked at me like, come on, man, I had to make money. And Scott said, hey, man, it's called making the best of a bad situation. And I said, okay, making the best of a bad situation. Okay, you sound like if California was a person. And he laughed. You're funny. All right, well, I got guests coming over, and they want you to sign some of your books. And I said, all right. And so we went back on what appeared to be a party table taken from the old Fredbears. And Scott had like piles and piles of his books surviving the night at Fredbear's, but I guess Hal can only be bothered to buy 4 of my 6 books that I wrote. But in about 10 or 15 minutes, the guests started pouring in. And yeah, most of them were here to see Scott after buying his book. And let me tell you, Scott really has made a lot of money off exposing Fredbears. Like, they've made animatronic action figures, they've made plushies, they've made coloring books. In fact, a little girl named Abby came in and he signed everything for her. He signed all of those things for her. But I had a couple fans come in too. Like this one guy who was really cool. He kind of looked like Skeet Ulrich from the 90s. And he said, Oh, Ethan, I can't tell you what an honor it is to be meeting you. I've seen all your videos. And I said, oh, well, I'm glad that you have him, and I'm glad you like him. And it's important to know that we got some evil people running the world. And he's like, hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. And that's why you're just such a big inspiration to me. I want to make my own documentary exposing people like that. And I said, okay, but make sure to be careful with it. And he said, yeah, for sure, man, for sure. Can I have a picture with you? And I said, yeah, sure. And so I took a picture with him. And then after that, I met this strange, rather plump young lady. She was wearing a dress and she had brown hair and she was a white lady and she was kind of young, but she dressed like a real old lady. And she came to me and said, Mr. Upshur, I'm your #1 fan. I've seen all your videos, and I've read all of your books. And sure enough, she was holding all 6 of the books that I had ever written. And I have them all in order, so please sign them. And she handed me the books, and at first I signed the copy of St. Stephen's that she had. And I said, who do you want me to make this out to? And she said, to your #1 fan. Okay, sure. And then she said, Ethan, I love you, and I just want to be with you. I want to be close to you. And she got real close to me and I said, okay, that's sweet, I said. And so I finished signing Massacre at St. Stephen's, and then she handed me Surviving the Salagi, and she said, that one's my favorite. I just find it to be so crazy, you know. And I said, I'm glad you like it. And then she handed me the book that I had written with Mia, Evil Residents. And she said, I hope you don't mind me saying, but I think you deserve better than Mia. And I said, I don't know. I really am in love with my wife. And she said, okay, all right. And I said, okay. Well, I didn't say this, but I thought, am I getting some Misery by Stephen King vibes here? And she started breathing real heavy. And then she handed me Crazy Cults. And I said, wait a minute, hold on. I wrote My Terror at Sea before I wrote Crazy Cults. And she said, I'm sorry, Ethan, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And I said, it's okay, I'm not mad or anything, it's okay. And so I signed that book, and I signed My Terror at Sea, and then I signed my most recent book at the time, which was Were Zombies versus Giant Alien Vampire Bats. And yeah, those were all my books. And I said, I'm sure you'll be happy to hear this, but there are more books to come. And she said, oh, I'll be the first one to buy them. And she said that pretty creepily. And I said, okay, well, I'm glad to hear it. Want a picture with me? I really wish I hadn't said that, because she said, are you kidding? Hell yes. And then she bought out a Polaroid camera. And then she asked Hal to take a picture of us, which he did. And she wasn't smiling in the picture. She was making a strange face. And I thought that was weird. And I thought, well, at least she's not as crazy as John Lennon's fans. And she said, oh, I'll be here all night. I want to go on the ghost tour with you. All right, okay, I said. And then, after that, it was time for the ghost tour. And then we just asked Hal, okay, Hal, we're going to get to this. Where the hell do you keep the Springtrap suit? And he said, oh, it's all the way in the back. Okay, and then we walked through the main attraction of Fredbear Frights. And I gotta say, that place was just all green and grimy and full of cobwebs. And I think that was the intention, but it was just so creepy, and the air was real heavy and thick, and it made you on edge, and the hallways just seemed so endless and dark and just grimy. It looked like a haunted, sunken ship. And then we walked, and Hal said, oh, it's night, and that means he's coming. And then we heard a metal grinding sound. And then, it sounded like metal was being dragged, and it was getting louder and louder, like it was getting closer to us. And then we saw something yellowish and a shade of green, of rotten green, start to come out of the darkness. And two big sticks were sticking out of its head. And it looked like that they were old, rotten bunny ears. And the big head started to poke out with broken, rusty teeth. And the ripped up bunny suit emerged from the night. And the long metal claws emerged. And it walked. It walked so jankily it just appeared to just not be human. And then all the guest eyes went wide with terror, and as it started walking towards us, they screamed and started to run. And then me and Scott just looked at it wide-eyed with terror, and the eyes started to glow. A big, dark, purple glow. And it said in a low growl, "I always come back." And then I stood back, ready to pounce. And then I lunged towards it and took a powerful punch right at its chest. Dong! But the same thing I did before was not going to work this time. And it took its claws and slashed right at me. And then it cut my cheek. But my cheek quickly started to heal. And then I stepped back and it said, "You can't kill what's already dead." And so we started backing up, and we backed up further and further and further until eventually we were at the end of the attraction, and then suddenly it stopped, like it was blocked by an invisible wall. And then it just said, "Come back here so I can hit you, okay? Please come back." And we said, "What? No, we're not coming back. Wait, why can't you just, come over here? Why can't you go any further?" And he said, "Well, I can't." And we both said, "Why the hell not?" And Hal said, "Because this right here is an original piece from the old Fazbear restaurant." Or Fredbear, sorry. Yeah, please don't sue us, Scott. "And his spirit can't leave, so he's contained." What? What? So he's stuck in this place? And Hal said, yeah. How stupid would I be to let a dangerous child-killing spirit loose? How stupid would I be, guys? Wait, so this guy in the bunny suit can't leave the building? What? And Hal said, "What? No, man, he can't leave." Oh, and Scott said, well, how come you didn't tell me that when we spoke over the phone?" And Hal said, because you wouldn't show up, duh. Really? So we just came over here so you could get customers in? And he said, yeah, that's right. I need to make money off you guys. I just looked at the floor and said, "Of course he used me for money." And I looked over at him and said, "Okay, give me some mushroom pizza, and I'll tell scary stories about what I've been through to your customers for a little bit of money, okay?" And then the next day I was flying back to Ethalonia to be with Mia.